Everyone, welcome back to the Wealth Builders podcast. Today's episode, we have a guest who's a bit more into the real estate and mortgage space, which I think would be really interesting to ask you a few questions. So, if you want to quickly go over who you are and what your background is for the listeners.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Gaurav. I own a mortgage brokerage called Homey. We help clients all over the UK and foreign nationals with their mortgage needs for properties in the UK. I've been a broker for about 12 years now, so I understand everything: mortgages, interest rates, flipping properties, and just basically all things finances and property.
Awesome. How did you? So you've been in for a little while. But how did you first get into it? Was it an interest you had, like kind of growing up, or like in school, kind of getting into property? Was it something that you got into because you wanted to build wealth through real estate?
Yeah, so what it was is when I left school, tried uni for a year, which I didn't want to do or enjoy. So I just took a year out of life and just pretty much partied up that whole year. And then I went straight into work. I started working for Phones for You, which is, for those that remember, it was a phone shop in the UK, just doing all sales. Uh, Left that and I moved into a bank, worked at Santander for a couple of years. Um, from then, that's when I got interested into mortgages because that was kind of the next level up. Started working for a few different mortgage brokerages in the UK, um, and it kind of was just interesting from that point of what people are doing with their finances and how much money you can actually make from properties. Um, Obviously, in schools you don't get taught anything about the real life world and property and all that stuff and how much money you can actually make from it. So it's interesting in that sense, and obviously I enjoyed helping people get onto the property ladder, but also investing and making more money. So I kind of stuck with it, and it's still enjoyable to this day, 12 years later. But yeah, there's just so much money to be made out of it. Just telling people how they can do it also helps, just to make people more money and myself at the same time.
Yeah, great. So for someone who's like brand new to real estate, what would you say is like the biggest benefit to like getting into the like kind of property market, and why is it such a good asset, would you say?
I think it's just the house prices always tend to go up anyway, even though we're in this current climate where house prices are supposedly dropping or going to crash. It's never really going to happen. You will see a small market correction, which is what we've currently gone through because house prices inflated during COVID. But if you look at the history of property prices, they'll always go up, then they'll come down a little bit, go back up again, go back down. Properties are basically an investment that gives you the most return. Simple as that. So if you buy a property today, in a few years' time, it's going to be worth a lot more money that you would never get from an investment or savings within that short space of time. And it's just how to utilize your equity in the property to basically get money back out, which is tax free, to then invest in another property elsewhere where you can start making money from rent or buying a rundown house, flip it, sell it. It's all that money that you gain from it is essentially tax free that you take out of the property, and you only pay taxes once you sell the property.
Yeah. What was it that, and how did you transition from like working? Do you say you worked for a mortgage brokerage and then you kind of transitioned into helping people yourself with your own
Yeah.
company? How did you kind of get into starting your own business as well?
So I was fortunate enough to have worked in some of the largest brokerages in the UK. And then from there, I've helped three mortgage startup companies as well. So that helped me learn what you need to do in order to build a mortgage business. And a lot of it is, as much as you're good at the job, a lot of it is outside of that because you need the leads and customers to come in. So you need to speak to estate agents, accountants, solicitors, but also you need to speak to customers. I need to build that trust with the customers so they come and use you. Now, I was lucky enough for the current company I own, I used to work for them as a sales manager. And they, the ex owners decided or had to focus on another business they owned. So they gifted Homey to me because I helped with the processes and setting up everything. So I took over. Now I run it, got a small team, which we're looking to grow. Um, but we just do what we do, which is help people with their mortgages and their finances, get the best rates, products, give advice, and basically connect with other businesses so they provide us with the leads that we can help.
Yeah, amazing. And for maybe people like myself who are maybe younger and not into like the world of real estate yet, could you maybe explain like what's the basics of what a mortgage is and why does it help people with like building wealth, uh, and how can it help you kind of reach financial freedom with like by through property?
Yeah. So a mortgage is essentially a large loan from the bank that helps you get onto the property ladder. So, for example, a lot of young people can be first-time buyers. Now, with them, they're going to want to buy a house or home first that they live in. So you'd put in a small deposit, at least 5% of the property value. Now, the rest of it you can borrow from the bank as long as you can afford it. Um, so you're going to have debt to start off with. Um, Now, you obviously pay that off. So every month you're paying down your mortgage as if it's a massive loan. But at the same time, your house price is usually typically appreciating as well. So you're bridging a bigger gap between the debt plus the actual value of the property. And that gap there is called equity. Um, so that's where people utilize that to either pay down a deposit for an onward purchase, for example, in investment property, or what they choose to do is when they sell, they make more profit off it because the debt's gone now. They've got X amount of money left over. Um, for example, the first property we bought, um, within the space of 2 years, the value went up by 100,000, and that's 100,000 we can use. So it happens to a lot of people out there that their house prices do go up, and what they do is utilize the current property to purchase an investment. That investment property, you're gonna basically put a typically a larger deposit of 25%. You still get another mortgage from the lender, but then you're putting the property on rent. So where your mortgage payment would be around £400, your rent is 1,000. That's £600 a month profit you can make. That £600 they get, they would basically try and clear off their own residential mortgage, so their own debt. So that essentially, after a period of time, you clear off your own property, so you own it outright, and investment properties will have the debts on it because that's an investment cycle, and you're always going to make profit off an investment until you sell. So it's just about which debts to pay off first and which debts to not pay off, and you can make a lot of money from it. And there's loads of people that we help that quit their main jobs because they're into property, into real estate, and they just make money off investments in property.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to like obviously I think a lot of people's main goal when it comes to finance and investing is like to be able to quit your job. So would you say like realistically is like a kind of portfolio of properties that you would need to, and how long would it take with going from your first property to then being able to have a portfolio which supports your kind of expenses? What do you think is kind of realistic in terms of being able to quit your job?
I'd say at least if you're planning it properly, at least 5 years plus, because you need to give your own current home enough time to go up in value. Obviously, during COVID, house prices went up quite a lot. Now they're coming down a little bit, but they'll go back up again. So, in order for you to benefit from your first home and get money out of it, at least minimum 5 years to then buy your first investment home afterwards. Once you buy your first investment home, you'll reap the benefits of that 2, 3 years down the line. And then you can buy another investment property. And now, once you do that roll on effect, it will become a much shorter period of time to then buy the next one because now you've got two properties providing you income rather than one. And the more properties you get, the quicker you can then buy your next property. So at least typically 5 years to start that process.
Yeah, and you mentioned how like in the current market, like I think a lot of people are anticipating a bit of a drop, and especially like there's very high interest rates. Do you think there is going to be a big property crash, or is it going to be more of a smaller correction? I know a lot of people like are guessing like maybe like 10% or 5% drop in prices, but there is obviously like a massive shortage of supply as well. So, what do you think is like coming up around the corner?
Yeah, so I said back in October and November time when all the stuff happened with the economy, house prices were never going to drop down 10, 15%, 20% as what people thought was going to happen. It doesn't happen. The only time it did happen was when it was the financial crisis because it was directly impacted by properties and mortgages. This isn't directly impacting that. Lenders still have money to lend out. So there's no shortage of money from the banks to give. Yeah, there's a shortage of properties, but people were trying to see what's happening. There was always going to be a market correction, which would be anything up to 5%, just because COVID inflated prices. Um, and once we're kind of towards the end of that correction, in my opinion, just because we've seen house prices be reduced in the first quarter of this year. Now they're kind of staying a bit stationary, and then they're going to probably go back up again. There was an article from Rightmove yesterday that said the average house prices went back up by 1.7%, I believe it is. So there's no market crash there if it's gone up by 1.7%. Yeah, their house prices have reduced, but they will go back to pre-COVID levels very soon, at least towards the end of the year. So we've got a lot of people that we speak to that are like, I'm going to wait for house prices to drop. Those people are going to be worse off because house prices will go back up again by the end of the year. Although interest rates are high, if you look at it in the long term, yeah, you take a little bit of a hit to start off with, then the market will correct itself and you'll own a property and own equity, which you're not going to get otherwise.
Yeah. So would your advice maybe to those people who are like waiting out for the crash to come, your advice would be just to maybe take the plunge because you can't anticipate, you can't predict the future prices, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just, I always tell people, like, if you can afford the mortgage and afford the monthly payments, then buy the property. There's nothing else to really think about because, yeah, if you think about it, right, the mortgage rates have come down quite a lot since beginning of the year anyway, where it was around 6%, then now around 4%. It's the fixed rate market is completely different to the Bank of England base rate. And a lot of people have that misconception that they're linked, but fixed rate mortgages are based on the future price, whereas the base rate is based on now. So it is different. But even if you take a mortgage, you pay 4%, your house price is going to appreciate more than 4% each year anyway, in a typical year. Even if this year it doesn't go up by 4% and it doesn't go up at all, next year it probably will go up by 6%, 7%. So your profit on the property is going to outweigh the amount of interest you're paying on the mortgage anyway. Now, I always tell people if you can afford it, buy it. If you can't, then don't. Buying property is never going to be a bad investment.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. When it comes to like choosing a mortgage strategy, what kind of advice can you give to maybe like when it comes to choosing like a fixed rate versus adjustable rate,
Yeah.
like finding the right product? What advice would you give to people at the moment, and what kind of things do they need to be looking at before they make the decision?
So first thing, they need to speak to a broker. A broker would obviously assess the market for them. But also, what we do as a broker is we speak to clients and find out what their plans are and what their budget is and how risk averse they are. So similar to if you do an investment, it will always ask you what's your risk profile. We speak to the customers and find out are they happy to get an adjustment product or a fixed rate, depending on the client's budgets and what other things they have going on in their life and plans. So fixed rate is pretty straightforward. It's whatever the rate is, you're going to keep that rate for that fixed period of time. So if you choose a 2-year product, it's fixed for 2 years. Doesn't matter what happens to the economy, what happens to the rates, you're tied in for 2 years at that rate. The adjustment rates, or we call it variable products or variable rates, they depend on two things. They either depend on the Bank of England base rate, which obviously we've seen go up, or it depends on the lender if they wish to increase it. With the variable products, the rates can change at any point. You don't have control of it. So 1 month you could be paying, say, 4%, the next month 4.2%, the next month 5%. So in this current climate, the variable products aren't as common because they are going to keep going up, and the fixed rate has taken priority. And that's usually fixed rates. People prefer that because they know this is how much I'm paying each month. Doesn't what happens outside of this. This is my monthly budget. So they know it's going to go out each month. Nothing's going to change. But at the same time, is some people with the variable product, you can switch the mortgage across at any time without penalty or sometimes very small penalties, which would then benefit someone that wants to live in that property really short term, say 1 year, and they want to find another property afterwards, so then they don't have to pay exit charges. So it really depends on the client and what their plans are, which is why it's always beneficial to use a broker because they give you the advice that you need and they will research the market for you.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think I recently saw online about how is it that they're proposing like a 0% deposit
Yeah,
scheme, and how would that work? Is that something that is realistic for like, especially I think it's for first time buyers, right? Do you know
yeah,
much more about that? And
yeah. So it's done by a building society, Skipton. They're the fourth largest in the UK. It's probably a good time that they bought the product out, just because it's 100% mortgage, no deposit required, but there are criteria to be met. So you need to have 12 months of rent payment on time. You need to show proof of bills being paid. Um, First time buyers, and you need to have good credit. The only downfall of it is that the monthly payment can't be more than what your average rent has been over the last 6 months. So it's not typically going to work for high earners living in London who are paying low rent, or people that are house sharing, because it's only based on the rent they pay. So it doesn't benefit every single person, but it is trying to tackle a problem in the housing market. And hopefully it's the first lender that's come up with this product at 100% since the financial crash in 2008. Hopefully there's more lenders that go moving forward will have a different 100% mortgage with different criteria or something close to it. So it's the first bit of innovation that's required. So hopefully there's more that follow. But definitely good if you're renting, you want to get on the property ladder, do it, because you will gain equity out of that property, and that equity will essentially be yours.
yeah, yeah, it's quite an interesting scheme, but like you said, with the requirements, it may not be suitable for people who are maybe paying like less for their current rent situation, like people in house shares, like you mentioned. Um, but yeah, maybe something for people who are looking to kind of get out of the cycle of renting. Would you say like renting is has a obviously as a mortgage broker, you think owning a property it has a lot more advantages than renting a place, right? And what do you see any kind of advantages to renting in the short term as well?
Um, Probably a bit biased from my point, but renting doesn't really solve anyone's. It's not as beneficial to rent unless you've got things going on or you've got other plans. Then great, but if you want to own a property or you want to get out of paying someone else's mortgage, then don't rent, and just try and build up a savings deposit at least, and try and put a plan in place for it. The way I see it is, if you're renting, you're paying your landlord's mortgage and giving him profit. You're not getting any return for paying that amount. Yeah, you're living in a place, but there's no real value to you for it. If you can put a plan in place that allows you to save at least 5% deposit, you can buy your own place. And trust me, when you buy your first place, it's definitely easier to then buy the next place. Even if you sell and buy or want to buy a second place, it's a lot easier once you've got a home. So definitely move from rent to owning.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to paying off mortgages early and like making
Yeah.
extra payments, would you say like what are the advantages um of like paying extra towards your mortgage? Or would you say that like in the current market, is that a reasonable thing to do other than compared to maybe putting that extra cash towards something else?
Yeah. So if you, depending on how savvy you want to be, if your investment is giving you a higher return than your mortgage rate, put it into the investment just because you'll make more money off it. So a lot of people at the moment, prior to this year, would have had mortgages below 3%, which is fine. Some people taking mortgages this year are going to have 5% interest rate. So it's wiser for them to pay off or overpay if their savings or investment isn't giving them a 5% return. So it depends on how you want to do. We get a lot of customers that are saying, I want to overpay my mortgage and the mortgage is 1%. But you're pretty much borrowing that next to nothing, and your investment's giving you a 7% return. Why not put that overpayment amount into your investment and get 7% for it instead of saving 1%? So it's about which one's going to give you a better savings or better return, and put it towards that. And you can always switch it around anyway. So once the if the investment's giving you less than the mortgage, put the money towards the mortgage. So it's just about making the most out of the money that you have. It's not always about overpaying the mortgage completely.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to like considering what real estate products or what deals to look for when kind of getting into real estate, how would you recommend people identify a deal in terms of looking at lo like factors like the location, the price, and what other factors do you think people need to consider when looking at real estate?
Yeah, so there's a few good things to pick out. It's transport links is always key for a house for a property value. How safe the place is and how much green space there is as well. Uh, that was one of the most surprising things. A lot of properties have high value if it's near green space, so like parks and forests and all this stuff, and just normal green space, so because there's less pollution, which is obviously one of the key driving factors for every country now for trying to be eco-friendly and stuff. So that's a driving factor. But there's a lot of properties that you can find through buying agents, and those properties aren't on the market. Typically, if you're looking for a property, you'll go on Rightmove and Zoopla as pretty much a standard first point of call. But there's a lot of properties available that aren't on those property portals, and you can find them through a buying agent. We've got connections and relationships with a lot of buying agents, and they do a really good job at finding properties. They'll approach people to try and sell their home, and those people will be interested in it. So there's a lot of stuff out there to look. There's a lot of tools available online that give you a report on a property and how good it is in terms of your location, the environment, what plans there are. As a first time buyer, when it was hard to understand what areas are good. You just look at a property on Rightmove, but it just tells you this is the property and nothing else really about it. But there's a lot more stuff out there where you can utilize the internet for it and have a look. But it's all dependent on people's circumstances. If you're young, you probably want it to be near a town so you can actually go out, or transport links so you can go to the next town and whatever else, and a few pubs and whatnot. For a family, it might be need to see what good schools are around. So it's all different, but all that information is available online to have a look at, and you just need to put in postcodes and it'll tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, yeah. What about like considering like the other prices on the same street and things like that? Like, would there be maybe if you saw a property which was like significantly cheaper than the surrounding area, would that maybe like raise a few red flags, or would that be more of like you see that more of as an opportunity?
And definitely raise questions on that, because there's obviously a reason why it's down so low compared to others. It might just be there's some issues with it, or there's if the property is much lower than everything else on the street, there's something wrong with it. But depending on how severe it is, it could be a good opportunity to buy it, flip it, sell it. Um, there's a lot of properties that are just on auction houses, a lot of properties that are repossessed from the banks that they just need to sell. So it's always worth finding out a bit more about it and seeing why it's not being sold, and then make a judgment call whether it's worth doing. Is that something you can get someone to do the work for? How much is it going to cost to do it, and then sell it? So it could be a good opportunity. Sometimes it's not always a great opportunity with what it seems. So it's always worth asking the selling agent, or even a surveyor or an architect, to come in and have a look at it and assess why, because they're going to be the experts on property build.
Yeah, do you carry out many like house flips, and would you say it's like an effective way of making profit? And like if so, kind of what are the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, so we've got a lot. I've got a lot of clients that do flips. Uh, they buy properties on auction or just relatively cheap, um, and they're like so below 100,000. Now sometimes they'll put all cash. Sometimes they'll just put a small deposit, so 25%, and then they'll get the rest of the mortgage. They'll do the work to it. So as an example, if you buy a property for 100,000, really run down, you put 25,000 in, plus obviously other associated costs, and put down an extra 5k for it, so that's 30,000. You need a mortgage of 75,000 from the lender. Now you do the work for the property, say it costs 10 grand to do work, because it's probably not going to cost a lot. So that's 110,000 all in all total. But then the actual end value is 150,000. That's already giving you £40,000 profit there. So now you can either sell the property or you can refinance it. If you sell it, that's £40,000 that you've got from just putting in um, a smaller amount, because you'll get your return back from the 40,000 plus 40,000 profit. Now you can use that 40,000 profit to then use on your onward next flips. So the way I see it, the way everyone kind of does it, is the first flip is always predominantly your own cash to put in the deposit. After that, after you do the first flip, the profit you get is what you use to flip every other property. So you use your money, you get that money back. Everything else is just purely using profit. And that's just really good because you don't have to put any other penny in yourself. It's just you're using profits to make more and more and more money, which is really good. So definitely, if you can afford to do a flip, then do it. But you've got to be hands-on and understand what work needs to go into it and project and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the risks of maybe things that can go wrong with a house flip? Like if maybe like I'm thinking like maybe overspending on things that don't add
Yeah.
value, things like that. Is that something that people need to be aware of if they're going to go into house flipping?
Yeah, you need to try and get people that that are recommended to you. So like builders, builders can start doing the work and then just leave. They can disappear. If that happens, then you're pretty much screwed because you need someone else to finish the job. The cost of materials is quite expensive at the moment, so there's always going to be more and more stuff that your builder's going to be like, we need to do this, we need to do that. The furnishing stuff you need to be careful of because you don't want to spend too much money on furnishing because that doesn't have real actual value. It just looks nice. Um, but it's the things to be concerned about is, can you trust the builders to finish the job to a good standard? And is the actual end value of the property real to what they say? Because before you start the work, they can say, yeah, after we do £10,000 work, it's going to be worth 150,000. But it could be that they do £10,000 work and the property is actually worth 110,000. So you've not made anything from it. It's just 6 months worth of headache. So you've got to get the experts, which are an architect, a surveyor, and builders that someone's used before or highly rated, and do the job.
Mm. Yeah, and then so do you think that if someone was looking to make more so passive income,
Yeah.
that property, obviously house flipping is more hands-on, but owning rental properties, once you kind of build up the cash to grow your portfolio, um, is real estate kind of one of the best ways to make passive income, you'd say? And what kind of tips would you give people who are like new to real estate but have some money to invest?
Yeah, so investing in real estate is a long game. Um, so as I said before, it takes about 5 years or so to start that process of doing it and getting the first property in. Now you're going to generate passive income because the mortgages are on interest only, so they're minimal, and you've got rent coming in, so you're going to make a profit each month. At the same time, the house price is going up on that property, so you can always the maximum mortgage you can take on that property is 75% up to the property value. So if the property is 100,000, you can always maximize it at 75,000. If, say, in 5 years' time, that house price has gone up to 150,000, you can then raise money up to 75%. So you can always take money out of that property and reuse it for another property as a deposit, and then get your second one, get your third one. I've got clients that have had over 100,000 properties in their portfolio. Not the biggest houses, not the fanciest houses, just a standard house. It varies from like Blackpool, some areas of Manchester, Liverpool, like that sort of area. Property prices are up to 100,000. A client had 112 of them when I first started dealing with her. She was buying a new property every single month just because there was so much money from there that she could maximize the amount of money she's taking out. And the money you take out is tax free. So you don't need to get taxed on any savings or anything else like that, earn more money and get a better job. If you utilize the cash you have, you can always take money out of your property, which is the easiest form of cash you'll ever have. But this is why you get a lot of property developers or professional landlords now that just purely just get passive income and just sit back and relax. They just get a property manager to look after the properties they have, and they just make money and just enjoy themselves and do what they need to do. At the end of the day, all they're going to do is sell the properties anyway, and that's it, and just retire completely if they haven't already.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned about like owning property like, in different towns across the UK. Do you see like any areas in particular which have like a big opportunities there? Obviously, like I'm from just outside London, and the prices in London are like crazy.
Yeah.
Obviously, like for someone like me to kind of own a property in London is almost seems like impossible. So what kind of markets do you look at? And is there anything like where you see like a particular opportunity?
Yeah, so London's always going to be outside of a lot of people's affordability. It's just the way it is. Um, but there's quite a few people actually that we have that are buying in the southeast, so like Kent area. That seems to be quite popular at the moment. In terms of investments, you've got everything up north. Um, what I tend to do is obviously you've got the hotspots. Liverpool, Manchester is pretty much going to be exhausted now anyway, and that'll get more expensive. So then you've got the towns next to it. But if you have a look at if you go to like Rightmove, for example, putting properties up to 100,000 and just see what areas they're in, have a look and see what councils are going to be regenerating the towns. Wherever the councils are going to be regenerating the towns, you can pretty much guarantee the house price is going to go up very quick. So, and the council, the government, the local council always announce it years before it's going to happen. For example, when the Elizabeth line came out, all the properties on that stretch from Reading up to, say, Hayes and Harlington, for example, before you get into central London area, um, all those house prices before Elizabeth line was mentioned was pretty much decent, okay, whatever. As soon as it was announced, years before it even finished, the house prices went straight up. And as soon as the Elizabeth line were opened, house prices went up again. There's nothing else to do apart from just investment in the area. And that's a massive thing because that's going to attract more people to want to buy there, which would increase prices because then it becomes more of a hotspot. So have a look and do some research on where the councils are going to regenerate towns and try and buy there because that's you pretty much guarantee a house price increase.
Yeah, that's good, interesting point because yeah, the town I'm from is like a 20 minutes train journey from London, and we have like a big regeneration going on. So maybe it's not so bad of like a place to invest because I think yeah, obviously you're relying on a lot of people from maybe like central London who have higher incomes moving out, but still being in with a commute of their workplace, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of going to boost the house prices.
Yeah, exactly. I think as well, like since COVID, a lot of people want to move out of flats into houses where they have a garden. So a lot of there's a lot of companies and developers that have stopped building flats and now building more houses. So the plans have changed. Just because if anything were to happen again, hopefully it never does, but if something did, people want that mental freedom where they can sit in a garden and not just be tied inside a house, inside a flat, for example. But we had a lot of people that wanted to move outside of London just because they were sick of it and they were able to go back in. Obviously now working from home is a massive thing. People want to work wherever they can, just going to their offices or London when they need to, not necessarily just live there. But you're still going to get a lot of people that want to live there anyway, regardless. Um, but there's a lot more attraction for outside London in the immediate area, at least within Greater London, North London. We've got good transport links in. But yeah, your area is going through regeneration. The house prices will definitely go up.
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. We have a couple of questions from my audience as well. Like I threw up an Instagram story. I think one of them was where we've covered a little bit already, but like where do I get started as a first time buyer, for example?
Yeah.
It's quite a wide question, but what do you think is like the key things that you should know as a first time buyer?
First time buyer, first thing you need to do is speak to a broker to find out how much you can actually borrow. Without that, you're going to be looking at properties that may not be within your budget or the area may not be within your budget. So what we do is we speak to clients, understand their income and expenditure, and check with the lenders and find out how much you can borrow. There's no credit checks done anyway at this stage, but that's where you want to start off with. Once you've done that, then you can start looking at properties within your budget, because you know this is how much I can borrow, this is my deposit, put it together, that's my maximum budget, and then start viewing properties. Once you start viewing properties, you'll get a feel for what you want in that first home that you're looking for. And once you've got that, or you've seen a property you really like, and you put an offer in, you just contact your broker again, tell them you got an offer accepted, and they'll take over the rest of the journey at that point. They'll basically for our customers, we're there from day one when they find out how much they want to borrow, all the way up until they get the keys for their property. So first-time buyers have millions of questions throughout. They need to understand everything that's happening, and we'll provide that to them and for them. So they're always going to be up to date with everything. Any questions, we'll always answer them for them. But you first need to start with how much can I borrow?
Hmm. And I actually have a question myself, kind of as a follow-up, because I'm just interested if, for example, me, like, I quit my job to kind of start my own business. If I was like self-employed or but still had like a good deposit, how would like a mortgage
Work for.
evaluation work? And would it be possible, like, would you need like to show like a history of X amount of earnings to qualify? How would that even, is that a possibility?
Yes, so for self-employed uh, clients or customers, there's you need to have at least 1 year's worth of accounts. So tax calculation, tax overview. Now your income as self-employed can vary. So it depends if you set up as a sole trader or set up as a limited company. If you've set up as a sole trader, it's pretty much you earn what you earn, and that's all yours and it's all taxed. If you've set up as a limited company, you can then pay yourself obviously a salary plus dividends to be more tax efficient. Now, the lenders will look for your total income that you've taken for that year. So you need to have at least 1 year's worth of income, and that will be the income they use for the affordability assessment. Um, so anyone that's self-employed needs to have at least 1 year's accounts.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And um, another question we had, what's the best way to attain seller financing?
So not too sure what they mean by seller financing, but I would assume it's going to be they want to sell and they want to basically buy another property. Um, if I assume that, so that doesn't seem to be UK terminology. But it's basically simply you basically speak to broker, find how much you can borrow because your circumstances are different. We've got to look at your income and expenses, see what deposit you've got or equity you've got from selling a home, and we can tell you what your overall budget is to then find an onward property. Um, and yeah, that's what I can say about that, really.
Yeah, yeah, and there was one more question I think we covered already, but given the rate rises, would you recommend overpayments or stock investments? I think, yeah, I'm interested to hear. What do you think? Obviously, you maybe are biased towards property, but like comparing real estate to other asset classes, do you think property is always the winner in terms of like an investment long term?
It's not always the winner. In most cases, it is. But you have depending on your profile risk for investment, that will kind of dictate which is going to be the best option for you. Like, for example, I'm happy to take as many risks as I want. So my risk profile is going to give me the biggest, potentially the biggest return, but potentially the biggest drop. Whereas house prices aren't going to drop as much as you put money in. You're pretty much guaranteed your money back, if not a bit more. But at at the moment, the rate rises are only affecting people that are on variable products, not otherwise. So their mortgages aren't going to change, right? So if, as I said before, is if your investment is giving you more, it's giving you a higher percentage than your mortgage rate, put money back into your investment, build that up because that's going to give you 6-7% plus return. Your mortgage is only going to be 2%, so you're going to make a loss of 5% if you put it in the wrong place. So it's always about just assessing who is giving you the best return for your money, which in most cases, it will be the investment. So you don't have to overpay the mortgage. So I, it's obviously great to be mortgage free if you can, and obviously that's the idea of a mortgage, to be mortgage free quick. But it's not always the best thing to do financially, because you can get 10% somewhere else. So put money into the 10%. Why save 2%?
Mm. Do you think with inflation being at like 10% in the UK, the like more and more people are going to struggle with keeping up with their mortgage with everything else becoming more expensive? Do you think that people need to be maybe give themselves a bit more space when looking at investment properties?
Yeah, like you always need to. You don't want to live check to check basically each month. So you want to make sure you've got enough there. So don't don't just put all your money into getting investment property or buying a property. It needs to be affordable, because you want to make sure you can cover yourself in the worst case scenario. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, this year that went from mortgage rates from 2% to 4% plus. That's no fault of their own, because they've budgeted that. That's people have gone from paying £800 a month to now £1,600 a month. That's £800 that they would have had as their backup anyway, but now this mortgage has eaten it. So unfortunately for some people that's happened, but if you speak to a broker, they can extend the mortgage term to reduce the payment. There's different stuff you can do to help with the mortgage payments without affecting your credit profile. But um, inflation, well, today it's gone down to 8.7% on the 24th of May, which is great. So it's going down in the right direction. So hopefully we're not in this mess for too long. But yeah, there's going to be people that are struggling. So there's a massive. I was reading something last week where a lot of subscriptions had been cancelled because you don't really need them. A lot of Sky packages were cancelled, and Virgin TV packages were cancelled, because it's not a requirement to have it. People can make do with the internet on their phone and just tether and all sorts of stuff. A lot of people go back into the office to save them their energy bills at home. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the moment, but I really do think towards the end of the year we'll see massive improvements. Energy price is going to go down in July, which is great for everyone. Mortgage rates are going to start coming down, which they have done. Property price will go back up, and next year it will be in a much better position than we are now. And your average person will be much better off than they are now as well. And those are the people that need help the quickest, really. So the Bank of England need to sort out the new start inflation quick and get people back to normal living standards.
Yeah, yeah, let's hope so. Let's
Yeah,
hope that it
yeah,
comes down quickly.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Let's hope.
Do you think that is there anything else, do you think, like real estate, mortgage related, or like what can you where can people reach out to you if they want to find out more, maybe contact you about any mortgage related questions?
Yeah, of course. So there's always going to be some mortgage related questions, one or another. Obviously, we're doing our social media stuff a bit more now. So we'll be providing mortgage tips, hints, and knowledge stuff. So follow us. Tag is just search Home Me Mortgages on Instagram. We'll be there. But also, if you go to our website, home-me.uk, you can book in a free call with one of our advisors, and they will answer any questions that you have about mortgages. They'll give you a mortgage in principle, which tells you how much you can borrow, uh, whether you're looking for a residential mortgage or a buy to let. So book in a free call with us. Ask us as many questions as you want. Um, and yeah, that's basically how you get in touch with us. And if you follow us on Instagram, there'll be more stuff coming soon. We've got some exciting news coming up as well, and hopefully some giveaways real soon. But yeah, we're getting into a good space at the moment with some good big partnerships coming up. So keep an eye out.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, I hope this is helpful. And uh, yeah, I appreciate coming on the podcast.
Yeah, Norwich, thanks for having me on. It's been good. This is my first podcast, so you had the privilege of having me on. But I appreciate you reaching out and getting me on here. So hopefully some of your followers find it useful. If they have any questions, obviously they can reach us at Home Me. And hopefully we help more people with their property and real estate finances, and help more people earn more money.